Hello, this is Chris Cooper, and a big welcome to the Business Elevation Show. It's great to be back with you again for yet another week. We're episode 627 today with a fantastic guest. We have Rhonda Curry. I'm very excited to introduce her to you. We're going to be talking about communicating for good. We'll be talking about storytelling to change and save lives. So do enjoy today. As I always recommend, if you have the opportunity to just take either a few mental notes or physical notes, or just one or two things that could be some golden nuggets that could be helpful for you. What we care about on this show is about introducing you to fantastic, exceptional guests who really care in their fields about contributing to good. We really care about improving the world and the environment. It's a very challenging place for many of us right now, but actually an exciting time to be alive, because it's the time, I believe, to connect people who are doing lots of good work around the globe and realize how many people are doing good work, because actually this is making a difference and will make a difference in the future. And if you can connect with people who are out there through their work shaping lives, or you can find yourselves in roles that are contributing to the greater good, then you're part of this needed system right now to really improve and elevate the world and the way that we think. And before I go into introducing you to Rhonda today, I'd like to say a thank you to my guest last week. We had Dr. Laurie Layden on the show, and we talked about healing trauma gracefully. Very powerful interview with Laurie. She's an amazing lady. She's had worked for 10 years in Rwanda helping genocide victims. She worked at some of the schools like Sandy Hook, where these traumatic shootings occurred, and has been helping people to heal their trauma. She's currently working with 40 mediators, senior mediators from the Ukraine at the moment. And we talked last week about healing trauma, what it is, and the best ways to go about doing that. So if you're interested in that, there's a lot of trauma out there with a lot of young people at the moment who are struggling with mental health and issues. Please go check that interview. You might get some really good inspiration as to how you can help. So words, they shape lives, don't they? If you want your communication to really build trust and to inspire action or change, or even save lives, and I think this episode is for you. We're joined today by Rhonda Curry. She's a member of my other community of exceptional people who are doing good in the world, called the Elevation Collective. But more importantly, she's a global communications and marketing leader. She's spent decades shaping narratives around health and cancer research, prevention, treatment and care. She's from UCLA Health. She worked from UCLA Health to the University of Miami Health System. She's at the forefront of telling stories that really build trust and inspire hope. They accelerate philanthropic support and help breakthrough science reach the people who need it most. Her work spans not only locally in Miami, but nationally and also to global audiences, including initiatives across Latin America, Africa and Asia. I'm going to talk today about how communications for good works in practice, and why simple human relatability is often the key to translating complex information, including science, without losing accuracy or integrity. Ron is also going to share some principles for writing compelling marketing communication. So I think that's going to be helpful to all of us. I think we're going to hear some really hopeful, practical, deep, meaningful advice today that can really help us communicate with great authenticity and create meaningful global impact. So a big welcome to my guest today, to Rhonda Curry.
Chris, thank you so very much for having me. It's a pleasure truly to be here with you in this setting. I've been grateful for all that you're doing and leading with the collective, and for the listeners who maybe don't know your two-word tagline, which is what really hooked me: good matters. And thank you for all the good you're doing. It's really nice to be here.
Well, thank you. We've got mutual respect here, Rhonda, with all the good you're doing as well, which is why you're here. And I'm really thrilled today to share a little bit more about you and the work that you're doing, but also explore this area of communication. Now, I wonder, Rhonda, you've had exciting career, and congratulations. I believe a promotion has just been announced. You're now head of enterprise communication for the University of Miami and the University of Miami healthcare system. So we'll talk about that in a moment. But maybe before we do, could you share a little bit about maybe your background, your life growing up, and how did you end up with this real focus around communication? Where did that come from?
Well, thank you. I had a career path that started actually at the community level. I raised my children in a very small rural community, and I went to work for a local hospital there. And we haven't practiced this question, Chris, but it's a good one because it was really a life-changing moment for me to have. When I would go into work, I would walk by people sitting in the waiting room outside of the emergency room. I would walk by families as they were waiting for their loved ones to come out of surgery. I would walk by the infusion unit where patients were having chemotherapy treatment. And being present in that environment really anchors you to the humanity of what is happening when people are vulnerable in healthcare situations. And I was not a doctor. I am not a clinician. I am not a nurse. Those incredible people who are on the front lines saving lives every day. But I knew that I could take my passion and my love for communication and help to amplify and tell the stories of the incredible work they were doing for people and patients and their families.
But what I'm interested in is where did that come from? Did you there's a young girl? Did you did this attraction towards communication and marketing? Did it come from somewhere? Was it inspired by
I think
family?
it probably came from the fact that I've always loved to talk. And there's a picture of me as a little girl with a telephone. Remember those?
Yeah.
So I think if I were to trace it back, I'm a communicator. I really love people. The thing that I love to do when I meet someone is hear their story. And so, no, I did not have an articulated career path with this at all. So it sort of naturally occurred and came to be through, career path, college studies. I did get my master's degree a little bit later in life, and I was able to choose what I wanted to do. And I thought about the term. I thought, well, a master's degree presumes one has mastery over a topic. What should that be? And as a young woman, I looked into perhaps I should get a master's in business administration. And then I thought, well, do I really love that curriculum? Do I want to study business? And then I looked at the curriculum through a few universities on what would a master's in communication look like. And Chris, when I pulled open the curriculum, I couldn't wait. I couldn't wait to get into that course of study. So I think it was the right choice, and it's been a lovely career.
So what you were saying, you felt a real energy when you looked at that, and you
Absolutely.
kind of
Absolutely.
knew
I
it
did a
felt right.
deep dive into leadership communication and what influences people, how we can better communicate to reach so many different audiences, and then to be able to use that every day and have teams that are just expert at it. All of the credit, truly, to where my career has taken me is because of the people that I've been so fortunate to work with.
Excellent. And has this all this expertise in communication helped you with as a mother and a grandmother?
Well, it's funny you should say that because I've often thought it should translate, and I hope that it does. I think you'd have to ask my wonderful three children who are now grown adults. How did she really communicate as mom? I think my grandchildren are hopefully reaping the best of those opportunities to really listen and and accept and be authentic in your communication with whether it's an external audience or at home. I will say I'm able to use quite a bit more humor off work than I do in my professional career. So that's a backstage interview.
Yeah. So tell us maybe, just tell us briefly then. You when we started talking about this interview, you were very much focused on health and also cancer. You've just announced in the organisation that you're taking on a larger role. Do you want to just explain what your role and your new role entails, just so we get a perspective of what it actually means, what Rhonda actually does, and has responsibility for
Yes,
that.
certainly. Well, when you have an academic medical center, whether it's the University of Miami, where I am currently, or others across the United States, they're a really incredible place to be. I'm very biased, so I will disclose that. But colleges and universities have different ways of being, and an academic medical center in one location houses the education. So you have all the students, the research. We have a medical school, we have a National Cancer Institute designated cancer research center, the clinical care, we have hospitals and clinics, and community engagement. We reach out at the community level all the time to help people learn and be healthier or smarter or both of those things. So, pardon me. So currently, the teams that do communication for the university, talking through all of the efforts that we're doing to attract students, we have 12 colleges at the university. Those colleges all have teams of professional communicators that are just fantastic. School of Nursing, School of Engineering, School of Music, School of Business, etc., like universities do. And then the medical school has a communication team. And then the Cancer Center has communications. And so I'll be fortunate to coordinate all of those fine folks who every day are out there telling the stories of their individual places where they work.
Excellent. And your work, you talk up sort of about communication, and when we spoke, you said to me that communication creates a story and marketing inspires action. Does your role incorporate that whole spread from communicating to marketing?
I
How does
have
that work?
had those organizations, yes, and currently I'm going to be focusing on communication because it's very broad. But
Mm,
I would go back to what you said and the marketing piece. We see those as two sides to a coin. The communications and marketing teams are integrated fully, and it is sort of left hand, right hand. Um, and I think that, keeping those two things integrated while independently running is a great structure, and that we see that happening across different organizations. And it's a really nice way to, I believe that the communications team creates beautiful content, right? So that could be a story, it could be whatever the piece is. And then that is what is deployed. We call it omni-channel. So it goes out through marketing, through communications. Same story, same premise, same principles, same strategy.
excellent. So we entitled this interview "Communicating for Good: Storytelling to Change and Save Lives." What, from your perspective, is good when it comes to communication? What does it mean?
To me, it's very simple. It's making meaning for others out of your words. And whatever it is that we're saying, we have to be able to resonate with the people that we're trying to reach. Let me give an example. Data and information and statistics are the facts that we then translate to make meaning for the audience. We know, Chris, that people are not inspired by a numerical statistic to the same degree that they are if you translate that into a story of meaning. So if you say, for instance, 100 people were diagnosed with X, Y, or Z, that's rather flat, isn't it?
Yeah.
But if you said 100 people were diagnosed with this, let me introduce you to Sharon. And she is a patient that had this disease. And let's have her tell her story of what she learned, how she was cared for. And so you bring people into that. If you make meaning out of a number, if you make meaning out of a statistic, it's far more impactful.
Mm. Yeah. So you're making it personal so people can relate to it.
Always. The human story is always the most compelling way.
Yeah. Yes. So let's make this really practical for people. If you had some key principles that would be really helpful to people when it comes to communicating stories. So, obviously, in your work, you're communicating stories about science and about people and people's lives. For other people, it might be they're communicating about their business and maybe the people in it, maybe about their customers. And their products and services. It's kind of
Yes.
directly related, or maybe success stories that people have had with working with them, if it's a service, etc. What are some sort of practical tips or principles that would be really helpful when it comes to communicating stories and information in a compelling way that really engages people?
I think I'll pull a page from, the Marketing 101 playbook, which is know your audience.
Yeah.
So every story that we tell, we're not telling it because we want to tell it. We're telling it because we believe that someone wants or needs to hear it. What is the lens that we need to see our listeners through or our readers through? And always going for that key principle of, and this is something that we work with oftentimes. People are very energetic about talking at people,
Mm.
but let's get out of that lens and get to who are we speaking with? What do they want to hear? So that's the piece that I think is fundamental. And it truly does cross marketing and communication across all industries. A company may have a product that they want to push out, but again, we all know if the customer doesn't want it, they have to understand, what does the customer want?
Mm.
And that is not different in healthcare. It is not different in shoe production. Whatever it is that we're speaking of, we have to understand that we are serving the audience.
Mm. And do you always know who our audience is?
Well, we absolutely we stratify our audiences again based on industry. So certainly we would know, for instance, we do communication for a highly scientific audience. We do communication for students. We do communication for patients. And so one of the things I always think about, and my teams talk about this, and it's an imaginary dial, but we say we dial up or down based on scientific literacy. So if there is a breakthrough finding in cancer research, for instance, Chris, we know that most of us have not taken advanced level science courses. So I'm getting into a specific example, but that's where we have very talented science writers. Many of them have PhDs, and they will take that discovery and they will write a story about it, but they will translate that science. They don't dumb it down, but they make it approachable so that if they were sitting at your dinner table and talking with you about this breakthrough, you would understand it.
Yeah.
Now, if we're telling that same story at an international conference with that is attended by top researchers and scientists throughout the world, that scientific literacy will be dialed up and our researchers would deliver that message. So yes, long way of saying we do know our audience and we work all the time to make sure that our message is translated to the right level.
Yeah. So I see. So you'll bespoke that message. It might be that you have an important message, but it has a number of different variations, does it, depending upon who you're going to share it to? Because
That is what I should have
yeah.
said. I should have said we bespoke the message. That was so beautiful. Yes, that's what we do.
Yeah. So I think that's key. So so the first thing is then you've got to make it relatable to the
Yes.
person. How do you make sure it kind of it emotionally links with people and not just intellectually?
That is where we are indebted, absolutely indebted to our patients and their families, again, for telling their stories. We would not have the robust, incredible stories that we do in healthcare and research if it were not for our patients and their families. It's a point of fact. If we have a story that we think is very newsworthy, and it is, and we have a top tier national reporter reaching out to us, first they ask, I'm paraphrasing, they're much more sophisticated than this, but first they ask, what's the story? And then they say, who can we talk to about it? It's that simple. Even with very, very early stage scientific discovery, the first thing they want to know is, can we talk to a patient, or how will this affect patients? So that's really where we are indebted.
Yeah. And do do all? I mean, do you find you have to, with some patients, encourage them? So, well, I guess you got to ask them if they're prepared to have their story shared.
Of course,
But
always.
are there other? Do you find some people just don't, or and don't want the limelight with it, or how do you go about managing that conversation with a patient who may or may not want their story told?
First of all, you hit on something fundamental that we shouldn't presume the listeners know. Patient privacy laws are strong and involatile, so we don't ever approach a patient to tell their story without the knowledge. Oftentimes, a physician will say, I have this patient and they would love to tell this
Yeah,
story. Or patients will write to us and thank us and say, thank you for helping this, or a family member, thank you for helping my father, mother, brother, sister. And then we will ask them if they are willing to tell that story. So it is always with full consent. And if there's any reluctance at all, we absolutely would not do that.
mm, yeah. And do you have a particular format or structure to telling a story about a patient?
We have great writers, reporters that talk to these patients, or we have we have so many interesting ways of telling stories now, Chris. I think it's so interesting. We have long form, the old long form journalism article story, right? We have social media teams that are just so talented and so energetic, and they may literally get a 30-second soundbite on a video from a patient and they run with that. So we're really flexible, and we have many, many ways of capturing stories in terms of word count, length, medium, and how we deliver it.
Hmm. Yeah. Uh, you also you have in your communications, you need to make sure they translate into different markets and countries, because actually your work is
Yes,
very international. And
yes.
when we spoke, I think you called it transcreation.
Mhm.
Tell us a little bit about that and how you make sure something really translates. Because I've certainly had experience myself in with different countries where maybe something doesn't quite sit well. I think I explained to you when I wrote a book actually with a clinical psychologist from Minnesota, and then with the publishing agents being in the US, what we started to realize was the subtle differences between communication in the
Mhm.
UK and the US,
Mhm.
we realised we at times were slightly divided by a common language, which was really fascinating.
Mhm.
The subtleties actually, something could be sound appalling to me or to them, and it didn't to the other. It's interesting.
Absolutely. It is not enough to simply translate. It is not enough to translate from English to Spanish by any stretch. And having the work that we do in Miami, it's a great example of this, Chris. And I have team members who are brilliant at transcreation. If we have something that we've written in English and we're putting it out to Spanish speaking audience, we will have this is a really it's nuanced, but it's important, and it illustrates the story that you just said. For instance, I have a woman on my team who is Spanish from Spain. I have a woman who's from Colombia. I have a woman whose family is from Puerto Rico. We have we have many Cubans in Miami who, when we translate something, we will put it out there in Spanish, but we always ask those team members, are we missing something? And they may tweak something slightly. And I hold no expertise in this. I am embarrassingly fluent exactly in English. So we really rely on team members to do that. And when we did global communication, other organizations where I've worked, we do the transcreation through one who speaks that language or knows that. Important that you have team members that are able to do that. Or if it's, as you said, working with someone, uh, you know, your English and my English, we may hit up on some differences, but it is a good thing to keep in mind.
Well, we'll talk about it later. But what I'm wondering now is whether with something like transcreation, if somebody doesn't feel they've got the resources to do that, because you're working with a very international team with lots of international connections. I'm wondering if it's a question that we can put through AI, for example. Actually, put a piece into AI and say this is actually going to go to these markets. Can you see any risks with the language that is used? Is AI accurate to do something like that? Do you know? Can it
I
help?
don't know for fact, but I would presume so. I would think the dialects are all being ingested and that we would have much better opportunity to be accurate, very targeted and specifically.
Yeah, I wonder. Well, we're going to go to commercial break now. After the commercial break, we're going to talk about some more aspects of writing communication. We'll talk about how do you lead through lots of different channels and approaches and utilizing different media. We'll talk more about AI as well and how AI can generally be helpful in communication or not. So do join us after the break. We'll be back with you again in just a few minutes. And again, have a little think about that section. I think is there anything in there? Maybe it's in Rhonda's story. Maybe it's in the reflections about actually how do you communicate? Are you telling enough stories, for example? Do you have stories in your organisation and your work that actually you're not sharing on a regular basis? Maybe that's something that you could take from this. So do join us again after the break. We'll be back with you again in just a couple of minutes. Hi, this is Chris Cooper. I'm with Rhonda Curry, and we're talking about communicating for good. We're talking about the importance of storytelling to really change and save lives. And I can really understand that with, medical patient stories, for example, and maybe the inspiration that can give to people who maybe discover they have cancer, or to researchers and scientists who are trying to develop cures. And what do you think? So I can throw this a bit left field, but what do you think are the overall benefits from communicating a lot and appropriately? I mean, because I imagine we could possibly also over communicate too if we're not careful.
Well, we have had wonderful success in the past with communicating prevention messages. I think that's a particular area where we focus in healthcare and cancer on prevention messages, meaning uh, the best prevention for skin cancer is sunscreen and skin checks. The simplest worldwide is they say, I think the public health experts would say the number one way to reduce your risk of cancer is two words: don't smoke. And Chris, that's an interesting
Mm.
topic. We spoke in the break about how communications, part of our work is what I said, to sort of see around corners, not only to be proactive and what's straight ahead, but what might be coming around the corner. And I'm really concerned about the uptick that we're seeing in smoking with young people.
Oh, really?
We have had decades of solid science that shows smoking is a terrible thing to do for your health and your cancer risk. And when I first started hearing that there is an uptick in young people with smoking, I almost couldn't believe it because, many decades ago, when my parents smoked, for instance, they truly didn't know it was harmful. And then we've come so far, and it's sort of you're gobsmacked. It's like, how could we be even possibly back here? So I think we need to be looking at that and probably telling more stories about that and getting back on that train of this is really harmful. And, going back and sort of dusting off those messages that swayed public behavior and modernize them for today's new smokers and audiences. So I think that's a really specific, pardon me, example. I don't think you can communicate prevention too much. I think you have to make sure that you're being heard. So you may have to do it differently. Again, back to knowing your audience. But prevention messages are really important for women. Getting your mammograms. We've seen prevention messages be quite successful. You may have heard a few years ago, Katie Couric, who's an American journalist whose husband died of colon cancer, had a big push for people to get colonoscopies. And because she endorsed it, and she had a colonoscopy and she had it on video, and she went on the news with it. And that year, colonoscopy screening went up 20% in the United States.
Wow.
Those are real numbers, but again, it was from a personal story. Angelina Jolie years ago wrote a very, very widely published opinion piece on breast cancer risk. And we saw women getting genetic testing like never before. So those are very powerful celebrity influencers, if you will. But the point is, prevention messages work. We can put them at the grassroots level. We have in Miami, we have sunscreen in dispensers on some beaches. And those are things where, again, we go from the education to the research to the clinical care to the community. So I do think we have a lot of benefit that we can do that certainly extends or saves lives from a very practical standpoint.
It's really interesting. Interesting in the smoking. I think in the United Kingdom we could do with "Don't Vape" campaigns, but
Ah,
so that's
mm-hmm,
what's really gone up over here.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, big time. I don't think people understand the risks of it.
Yes, yes, it's an interesting topic. I kind of think that having a resurgence, and I don't have the data, so I need to back it up, but we really do need to pay attention to that because we have all of these beautiful young people who may not have had the same information that we did, and it just doesn't seem as scary, and it certainly is.
Yes. Um, so how do you ensure? I suppose if you want to make sure something is accurate and it's of high integrity. We know within your creative teams when maybe they're not all science experts. How do you ensure fact check and make sure things are correct? Have you had any examples where maybe something's gone wrong?
Sure. So for the written piece, we always lean on and only publish with that scientific expert's approval. We publish all, we feature scientific research that has been published in peer-reviewed journals, for instance. So we don't take creative license with the science. We know we are not the scientists, we are not the researchers. We look to them to endorse, sign off, and review everything that we do that relates to their science. I do have a funny story. This is more in the marketing realm, but I was with an organization and we were doing an entire a new brand campaign, and it was a cancer research center. And we hired this really creative ad agency, and they came back to our team with, we thought they were just phenomenal ideas for a new look and a new logo. Now, again, this is the team of us that are not scientists. And we fortunately were smart enough to know we could not be the final decision on this because we are not the cancer researchers. So we had a town hall gathering with our top researchers and we did the big reveal. We were ready for all the applause. And we had this, he was such a character, just stood up in the audience, actually stood up. And I'll remove the expletive. But he said, "Oh, blank, you have the DNA backwards." And it was a pin drop. And I share that because number one, everyone in this career field hopefully will have some sympathy for the mistakes that you can inadvertently make.
Yeah.
Again, you don't know what you don't know. So always trust, but verify. And we did. And we flipped it around. So all was well in the end.
My favourite story coming back from my marketing textbooks when I was doing my degree many years ago. But there was a story of a soap powder company who a global one who did a national campaign and a campaign in the Middle East, and they had a young boy. It was three images on these billboards, and they went right across a lot of markets, and it was a boy with a dirty tunic and then a washing machine. His mum put in this tunic in the washing machine, and the third image was that he was clean. But the problem was that people read backwards, so they saw a boy with a clean tunic end up dirty. So it didn't really work. It was, but I think we can
Oh
need to
my
be
goodness,
careful, don't we?
literally lost in
We
translation.
have to be careful.
Both stories.
So how do you decide with your communications about whether you know use paid media to get those messages across? For example, people are probably wondering, they maybe use some of the social media, and should I be paying to get my messages out more widely across the internet, for example? Do you have those sorts of decisions to make?
We do, and that's a financial analysis always. We employ an omni-channel approach. So we do our owned, earned, paid, and experiential. And for those that may not know those terms, so our owned channels are our blogs, our internet, our social media channels. Earned is when we have a reporter that has interest and we earn the media. Experiential is when we put it out, and that costs money. If we do a community, just what we talked about, if we put sunscreen on a beach, we're investing in that. And then the community engagement, oftentimes that is free if we put a speaker at a community group to educate them. But your question is, how do we decide when it is a paid effort?
Mm.
And so if we have agreed that it's a strategic priority to really push on lung cancer screening, for example, we want people to get screened for lung cancer. We're going to allocate funds to do that paid campaign as well as the owned experiential pieces. So it's a calculus, it's budget based. What are the priorities? What are we looking to do this year, this fiscal? Everybody has to balance budgets, but we generally would say that if we think it can make a bigger impact and we can demonstrate the return on that investment, and we have ways of measuring that, of course, then we will invest in it.
So in the United States and Miami in particular, you might have initiatives like you mentioned there about sunscreen. It's interesting where you'll actually fund sunscreen
Mhm.
because you believe that that will have a reduction in the number of people needing care. But then I guess the challenge is you've also care can be quite commercial.
Of
So
course.
how do you sort of manage, how do you get an initiative through? That sounds a really good one. Providing people with free sunscreen. How do you get that through a system that might also benefit from the commercial nature, having people coming in with skin cancer? It sounds really crude, but
Uh, yes. Well, unfortunately, the burden of cancer is extremely high, and we do not have any shortage of business.
right.
And I do find, again, I find a lot of goodness in the work that we are able to do, and organizations across our country certainly do support. Cancer research centers have a mission to help the public and to educate them. So that's the lane that I am able to travel in, and it's why the work that I do is so rewarding.
Excellent. That's good. Good to hear. So your teams do use AI. How do you utilize that AI, and what's your perception of it in your work? Because people are wondering how much do we do this? Do we get AI to write things for us, or do we write them and then put them into AI? What's your perspective on it?
It's such a great topic. It's so exciting, isn't it? It
Mm,
is, everyone is talking about it. It is hearkening back to remember that thing called the internet, and people were saying, what will it do? How will it disrupt us? And here we are again in a tremendous day of AI. We do use it. We are excited about it. We have an organizational theme of AI for everyone. And we're educating our teams, we're training, we're using generative AI across the university and the health system in hundreds of different ways. But as it relates to the communications team, we are excited about what it can do, and we're also looking at strategically the advantages of it, Chris. So one thing that our teams are talking about every day is, it doesn't replace the writer. It doesn't replace the author's byline. When I have a PhD science writer translating a discovery, uh, that byline, that writer is writing. We're very, as everyone should be, we're very committed to ethical practices. One thing it is doing, though, that is just frankly so helpful is, it provides a second set of eyes on an article. You can have AI take over many of the tactics that pulled your teams away from more creative or strategic work.
mm,
We see it as sort of a, AI assist, if you will. If you take a story and then you want to convert it into another vehicle for communication, whether it's a PowerPoint or an executive briefing or a what have you, you can do that in in a snap, as opposed to someone that you have working on 17 other projects, adding an hour to their day. So the very practical bonus of it and efficiency is tremendous. And I think that the team that I have of writers and communicators are just really quite excited about it. And also we're learning. And I won't go into the weeds too much, and I'm certainly no expert, but what we're learning is it's really all about the prompt. And people that are steeped in AI are going to say, well, obviously, but some of us are still communicating the newness of it. And the more you can educate your AI and the prompts that you give it, you know, that's where you get the highest value out for the work that you're doing. So
Yes.
it's great. I'm looking at it from a communication standpoint. Of course, we know it is extraordinarily helpful in the healthcare enterprise and financial data and all of that, but it is certainly something that we're embracing and excited about.
Because it's interesting what you say, because there's almost a new skill set that has come out of AI in that ability to be able to really question it and utilize it almost like a trusted like an advisor, really, but also to be
Absolutely.
able to really guide it. And because as you know, it might also come out with answers, but actually to be able to challenge those answers and eventually get to something which is better than you would have done individually.
Absolutely. When in the past someone would come and present you with their work and you would look at it and you would take time to make not only make edits, but perhaps say, this is good, but what if you turned it into a this or that? You that's where your prompt comes in. And again, working on what is it that we're looking for. And if you don't direct that, it's built to be helpful. Would you like me to turn this into an X, Y, or Z? Well, that is again where your strategy and your own authenticity will guide and direct. It's your assistant. It's your assist.
Yeah. And how this show, as that's the strapline, because good matters, which you referred to at the beginning. How are you feeling about is a storyteller who gets to really understand what's going on in labs and research centres and hospitals? How are you feeling about the the world, the sort of good news right now? Obviously there's a lot of negativity around, but how do you feel about the work that people are doing in, for example, driving healthcare forward?
Oh, it is a day of incredible optimism. I wish I could convey this quickly, and I hope I can. But one example that I can give you, Chris, every week, at least every week on my phone or my computer, I will get a notification from one of the top premier research publications, let's say globally. And I will get this notification because they'll say, one of your researchers is going to be featured in this publication, and it'll list the very, very specific research project that they're on. And then it will be emailed to dozens of people like myself, the communications department of research universities across the world. And you will see the list of researchers in the dozens. And you look at where they're from, and they are from countries all over the world. And my point is, every day that we wake up, there are researchers collaborating on diseases, human diseases, in ways that are just staggering. And this work goes on around the clock, around the globe, and they're working together to learn additional insights. I've said to you that I think the greatest mystery on earth remains the human body
Mm.
and what makes us get sick and what keeps us well. And there is tremendous optimism, Chris, and we have to tune out some of the other noise. I know people do it in different ways, but thank you for letting me say that. Good does matter, and good is happening every day around the world to help human health.
That's a wonderful message. With when people may hear different taglines and and actually storytelling that's more focused upon getting views often than reality. So
Yes.
you're the almost the opposite of that. You're focused upon sharing news that's genuinely helpful for people, and often uplifting and positive. Um, but what we read in our media may not always be. So often designed to get our attention. So it's good to hear that that you're feeling so optimistic, which is absolutely brilliant. What if people were listening and thinking back to this interview after, say, in a week's time, is there a message in there that you would love people to go away with? And what would be the one message you'd like them to take from our conversation?
Because it applies to everyone, I would say find a person, a real person, not on Zoom, not online. Go find a real person and ask them to share a part of their story with you and listen. And you'll be inspired and you'll be connected. And that's fundamentally what we are trying to do, which is to connect with people in a way that helps both parties.
That's beautiful. And what also spurs on for me is there's probably quite a lot of people out there who don't realize that in themselves there are stories about their lives that are hugely inspiring to others. They may not even
Every
realize that.
person has a story and it is worth hearing. It is part of our humanity, and that is universal.
And I just sort of share as somebody who learnt over a number of years to speak at events. And one of the things that I decided to do was to try and mine and think back to some of the stories that happened in my life. And I tried to fill in gaps and years that I couldn't remember. And actually, what that did was that produced all sorts of thoughts and stories and things that I'd forgotten. And actually realised that whereas you might think your life is dull and boring, actually your life's full of all sorts of stories that can lift other people and lift you when you recall them. We often forget that. And I've just noticed we've got a minute left till I've got to end the interview. Rhonda, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. Is there any link or anything that you might like to share for the university, or do you want people to check you out on LinkedIn or anything like that?
Oh, you can find me on LinkedIn. I actually would be embarrassed to tell you I don't have the exact link, but I'm Rhonda Curry on LinkedIn and University of Miami. And Chris, I want to thank you so much again. This has been delightful. Thank you for the work you're doing.
Thank you, and for what you're doing as well. Lots of mutual appreciation. It's brilliant. Thank you, Rhonda, so much for joining us. And if you've got any questions or comments, I'd love to hear them. chris@chriscooper.co.uk. On next week's show, we have Helen Avery. Helen's going to be talking about nature, actually, and how we can fund and evolve projects, and some of the projects around the globe that are happening due to people raising finance and money to improve and biodiversity and evolve it, and stop the declines that we're experiencing, and why we're going to talk about why we should all really care about nature next week. So we're going to go from healthcare and storytelling to storytelling about nature. So do join us again next week. Have a wonderful week, and please go away and think about how the good that you can do in the world and the good you are doing. And let's keep this energy moving forward into 2026. We need lots of good stories, lots of good news. Rhonda, an absolute pleasure. Thank you. And for
Thank you, Chris.